I'd like to welcome you to the first in a series of webinars informing you about the Every Student Succeeds Act, the new federal legislation for K-12 public schools. Joining me today in the webinar are representatives of our collaborative organizations in this endeavor, ACTFL, Joint National Committee for Languages, National Council for Languages and International Studies, JNCL Nicholas, NADSFL, the National Association of District Supervisors, Foreign Languages, and NACESFL, the National Council of State Supervisors for Languages. And representing those organizations are Bill Rivers, Executive Director of JNCL Nicholas, Anne Marie Gunter from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, also President of NACESFL, Jay Kettner from the Maine Department of Education, Vice President of NACESFL, and Leslie Baldwin from the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Public Schools. As I said, this will be the first in a series to inform you as language advocates, not just people in the language field, but parents and administrators beyond the language field, about the stipulations of the federal legislation and how to ensure that languages are well represented and well funded through the appropriate process. In addition to the webinar, we will be providing some other materials in what we are calling a toolkit. So each of our 4 organizations that are represented today on the webinar will have these materials available on their websites for people to use and to inform them even further about the different various titles of the legislation. I do also want to make a comment about the use of the term foreign language in our webinar series, as opposed to the more common term that most of us use these days in the field of world languages, or sometimes just languages as a plural. And the reason we are we're reverting to foreign languages is that is how the federal legislation terms it. It is the term that the federal government still uses. So we are using it today so that you can find the appropriate sections of the legislation that are pertinent to people who work in the language field. So in today's agenda, we'll be looking at a review of ESEA, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and an overview of Essa. We'll be looking specifically at Title IV-A, or the Well-Rounded Bucket, and the SSAE grants, Student Support and Academic Achievement grants, that are also part of the legislation. Some other provisions in Essa that are pertinent to the language field, and then a guide for how you as advocates for language programs can play an active role, which is so critical in this particular effort. Just a quick review of ESEA. As I said, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, first passed in 1965 as part of President Johnson's War on Poverty legislation, then changing to the Improving America's Schools Act during the Clinton administration in 1994. This is actually where we experienced in the language field the Goals 2000 legislation, from which we developed our national standards for language learning, which has now recently been revised to be the World Readiness Standards for Learning Languages. So that was the impetus for our own standards in 1994. And then, of course, under the George W. Bush administration, 2001, No Child Left Behind was enacted, and that really placed a focus on, as you know, developing proficiency in students in English language and also mathematics. And so that legislation has been changed, effective around December of 2015, to the Every Student Succeeds Act, or Essa as we're calling it now, and it really updates the No Child Left Behind and reauthorizes the ESEA. So in terms of that, what we're seeing in this new legislation, and this is why it's so critical that our language advocates know how they can be active in making sure that the appropriate funding gets to language programs, is because it shifts a lot of the policy decisions from the federal level to the state and local levels. So we'll be going over that very specifically in the 8 titles that you see over on the right. We'll be featuring the ones that do involve language learning. In terms of a timeline, the U.S. Department of Education is still drafting regulations, but we wanted to get out in front of some of that information that will follow, just to get people thinking and acting so that we can have an impact, appropriate impact in all of the states and at the local level. So they will still be drafting those regulations this fall. They will be finalizing the regulations, hopefully, for the competitive grant programs that are in Essa by October. And some of the first state plans will be submitted by March of 2017. And then by July of 2017, they will hopefully be putting, finalizing the changes to the formula grant programs. And then by July of 2017 will be the second chance that states will have to submit their state plans. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill Rivers, who will talk about Title 4A and the SSAE grants.
Thanks, Marty, and thanks to everyone else for participating in this very important webinar. So as Marty said, the Essa takes a kind of different philosophical approach to curricular improvements in our school systems and devolves the authority to the states and local level through these formula block grants. The most important formula block grant for foreign languages is in Title IV, Part A, Subpart 1, which are the new SSAE, which means the Student Support and Academic Achievement Grants. And these are going to be formula block grants to the states for 3 purposes: to provide students with a quote-unquote well-rounded education, and that's defined in the law, and we'll get to that in a second, to improve school conditions and health, and to improve the use of technology in schools. So what it does is it takes a block grant that's based on, essentially on the Title I block, so this is the same formula they use to determine how much states get for at-need students, and give the state education agencies that amount of money to distribute. And then the state education agencies are allowed to spend roughly 3% on planning and program development, and the rest is meant to go down to the local education agencies. So they have this, as it says, the state education agencies must devise plans describing how they're going to provide assistance to the local education agencies, to our school districts, in administering the grants. At least 95% of the funding goes to the LEAs. On my next slide, we can talk about what well-rounded education means. And it's courses, activities, and programming in subjects such as English, reading or language arts, writing, science, technology, engineering, math, foreign languages, civics and government, economics, and it goes on and on and on, as you can see. So we're going to cover this more at the end, but I wanted to sort of give a heads up and set up what's going to come later on. It's really important. You see a really long list of subjects there. And these, remember, this is one part, the well-rounded education is just one of 3 funding buckets, as they call them, under Part A, Subpart A of Part 1 of Title IV of Essa, the Student Support and Academic and Enhancement Grants. There's well-rounded, there's school safety, and there's technology. So we're in part, we're one of 3 groups for well-rounded, and under well-rounded, there's a long list of subjects. So it's going to be really important. And I know that Jay and Anne-Marie and Leslie are going to talk about this more. It's going to be really important for our local advocates and state advocates to engage with this process so that we can get languages into those plans. And now I think I'm going to turn it over to Jay.
Thank you, Bill. I will talk about some other relevant ESSA provisions. ESSA provides 4 other titles or sections of the law that provide opportunities to support foreign languages as part of offering a well-rounded education to students. First, I'll start by looking at Title I, improving the academic achievement of the disadvantaged. Title I calls for targeted assistance school program plans, which are required to serve participating eligible students by using resources to help them meet state academic standards. These resources may include programs or activities necessary to provide a well-rounded education. Given the correlation between foreign language study and improved cognitive development and academic achievement, as well as a host of other benefits, there's an opportunity to use Title I funding associated with these plans for foreign language learning. Title I also calls for school-wide program plans, which are plans that document methods and strategies that strengthen the academic program of the school, which includes a well-rounded education. Moving to Title II, preparing, training, and recruiting high-quality teachers, principals, and other school leaders, Title II supports professional development activities. Essa defines professional development as activities that are an integral part of school and LEA strategies for providing educators with tools necessary to provide a well-rounded education. So, Title II professional development programs should be made available for foreign language educators. Title III, language instruction for English learners and immigrant students. Under Title III, dual language immersion programs that serve English learners are permitted to utilize those funds. Examples of this are already happening. If we look at New York City, for instance, a number of schools have used Title III funding to add dual immersion programs that serve both English language learners and other families who want their children to be literate in multiple languages. Similarly, local districts in Utah use funds in a similar manner. Title VI, Indian, Native Hawaiian, and Alaska Native Education. The Native American and Alaska Native Language Immersion Program is authorized at $1.1 million with grants to be awarded competitively. If your school or LEA falls within this category, there may be an opportunity for funding. Here I'll pass it to Anne Marie Gunter, who will speak about some advocacy points.
Thank you, Jay. One of the things we would like to provide you with is some information you can use in advocating for foreign languages as part of the ESSA plan. Here are some talking points that you can use specifically that have been designed and linked to research within the toolkit. Let's take a look at what we have here. The first one is students who study languages perform better than students who do not on standardized tests. This is true, and there's substantial research to back that up. One of the most common sets of research that is used is the Scholastic Aptitude Test, or SAT data, published by the College Board every year, showing the graduating seniors and the impact on SAT scores for students who studied 3 years of language or more. The next one, students who study language demonstrate improved cognitive development and skills compared to their monolingual peers, has also been borne out in research over a number of years. Specifically, when we talk about cognitive development, students who studied language have improved mental flexibility, creativity, divergent thinking, and higher order thinking skills. The third one, dual language immersion programs help close the achievement gap between native English speakers and English learners, has also been supported by research very recently. For example, the Thomas and Collier studies in North Carolina showed that students who are English learners exited ESL programming earlier when they were in dual language immersion programs, and in general, all students who are in a dual language immersion program perform better on standardized tests. For example, research has shown some significant closing of achievement gaps, and that has caused dual language immersion programs sometimes to be used as a school improvement model or a turnaround model. The fourth point, elementary school students that participate in foreign language in elementary schools or FLES programs significantly outperform their non-language learning peers on standardized tests in English language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. Again, there are many studies that support that, including one done recently in North Carolina on a daily FLES program and the improved results on standardized tests for students. The fifth point, learning another language improves an individual's earning potential later in life, has been a topic of several articles recently in the popular press from the business world, as well as the military and diplomacy worlds. And finally, the sixth point, foreign language study improves students' openness to other languages and cultures, has become more of an issue in our world recently, and this is sometimes referred to as cross-cultural competence. So those are some talking points that you can use either with your SEA or LEA work on your ESSA plan. And now Jay is going to continue on with some other points.
Thank you, Anne Marie. There's important things to ask for when you speak to your state education agency. Specifically, ask for foreign language learning programs to be encouraged by the SEA and its plan for the student support and academic enrichment grant funds. When you advocate for foreign language to your SEA, asking for this specifically is of direct benefit because these funds support states and districts in providing a diverse array of learning opportunities. We can look around the country and we see a few different examples of stakeholder engagement processes already taking place. In Arizona, there are online surveys have encouraged outreach through social media. California has stakeholder engagement meetings, webinars, and surveys. In Colorado, there's a statewide listening tour taking place. And in both the states of North Carolina and Maine, the state educational agency has an online portal where stakeholders can submit comments to the state. There are also examples of ways the SEA can look to influence LEA plans. The SEA can explicitly say which programs may be funded, which is less likely than some other options, or provide informal encouragement of certain programs through the application format or state-provided examples of fund usage. And we'll see more ways to include foreign language in SEA plans on the next slide.
Here are some ideas about how to encourage foreign language inclusion in SEA plans. Specifically, let's start with public options for engagement. For example, you could host or participate in town hall meetings. You could also find out if your state has an ESSA task force and attempt to participate. Jay mentioned a couple of resources already that are available with states online and throughout the state. You could build coalitions with other groups, so parents, business leaders, or others in your community that believe in the value of foreign language learning. Or you can engage the press by writing letters to the editor about foreign language learning or by writing an op-ed piece. Many of our media outlets now encourage that kind of participation, and so there are a lot of opportunities for that.
And there are also some possible private options for engagement, creating a target list of potential champions for foreign language programs, and mapping your assets to this target list. You can also set up advocacy meetings, phone calls, and emails with policymakers and other language allies. And from here, I'll pass it to Leslie Baldwin.
At the district level, when you advocate for foreign language funding for your LEA, you should be asking for funding through Title IV-A as part of the well-rounded education bucket, and if applicable, for dual immersion program funding through Title III. It's important to find out what is already going on in your district related to this request and with whom you need to talk in order to have a voice at the table. You can also focus on programs or sections of the law that are particularly relevant to your LEA. It's important to note that needs assessments are required for LEAs that receive an allocation above $30,000. If required to create a needs assessment, we encourage your LEA to use ACTFL's Needs Assessment tool to help formulate the needs assessment. There's a link to this tool on the ACTFL website. Your Title I office might also already have some of this information prepared in the Title I District Needs Assessment. Even if a needs assessment is not required in your district because of the level of funding, you may still use the needs assessment tool to help provide a justification for inclusion of foreign language programs in your LEA plan. You might also find out whether your district already uses Title III funds to fund dual immersion programs, or how you might access those funds if they don't already do so. At the local level, there are many ways to engage parents and community groups, including community meetings, email listservs, social media, etc. And you can ask leaders to send messages to the decision makers in the LEA. For example, in Fairfax County, Virginia, groups like Fairfax Flags exist to preserve language immersion programs. Try to identify individuals with influence in your LEA or who have a connection to foreign language education. Talk with parents or PTA presidents with whom you know to be supportive of language programs, and depending upon the politics in your district and relationships with school board members, you might also talk with them as well. And I'll give it back to Marty Abbott to conclude our session.
We are concluding with the contact information for each of the people who spoke today on the webinar, and we encourage you to take the action that was suggested by the members of the webinar, and stay tuned for other series in webinars in this series that will highlight additional information about the legislation as it comes out. And again, we will have toolkit components available on the websites of all 4 organizations for your use as you proceed in making sure that languages are well represented and well funded in the Every Student Succeeds Act legislation. Thank you.